Dredge is a sinister fishing adventure developed by Black Salt Games and published in March 2023. It's one of the more recent and certainly most polished games in the niche but well-established horror fishing genre. In Dredge, you are the latest fisherman of the Marrows, a small archipelago in the centre of Dredge's map, with the nominal task of catching fish for the people of the town. In your first few days, you'll poodle out into the bay and return later with a meagre selection of local fish, but as the desire to explore takes you further from the familiarity of Greater Marrow, the daily acts of a jobbing fisherman take a back seat as you start to uncover the true dangers of the deep. Dredge revolves heavily around its day-night cycle. During the day, the waters are mostly safe, but at night mysterious horrors are all around. Creatures that seek to cause you harm, apparitions that drive you into a state of panic, or just the threat of crashing your ship in the darkness. Was that rock there before? The idea is that during the day you can explore, complete quests and catch fish to sell and make progress on upgrades, and at night you buy and install those upgrades while hiding in the safety of a dock, a system that works, at least in theory, until you need to catch the fish that only come out at night. The mechanics of Dredge are relatively simple. To catch a fish, you find disturbed spots of water, and the fishing mechanic is a reaction minigame. Whenever the arrow crosses a green segment, you can pull the fish aggressively to speed up the process. The more often you hit those green segments, the quicker you'll catch your fish, and the more you can haul in before nightfall. There are a handful of fish where this mechanic is implemented slightly differently, though still with the focus on timing button presses. When you catch a fish, you pack it into the hull of your ship like a Resident Evil backpack, along with your engines, lights and rods that also eat up cargo space. The type of fish you can catch depends on your equipment. A short rod for catching fish near the shoreline won't do much good at hauling in a tiger shark from the open ocean, and so with the money you earn from your catches and materials you find while dredging, you can upgrade your rickety boat and diversify your toolset, eventually creating a ship that's larger, faster, more adaptable, and less prone to fatal damage. Yeah, fishing doesn't normally incur fatal damage. But not everything in Dredge is happy with your presence. At night time, as your madness grows and the fog rolls in, the waters become a dangerous place to rest. While the Marrows is your home, Dredge's central questline will send you out to the game's 4 other locations, each dotted in its own corner of the map. The Twisted Strand, the Devil's Spine, the Stellar Basin, and the Gale Cliffs. Each zone is filled with its own varieties of fish, its own inhabitant, its own small questlines, and importantly, its own unfathomable creature lurking somewhere in the waters. These marine threats define how each area of Dredge feels to play, and the intrigue of what might lurk in an area unexplored is what drives you around Dredge's map. And as you explore, you'll make progress in filling out your encyclopedia of fish, meet people with various wants and needs, and slowly start uncovering the mysteries of Dredge's world. The first thing that I want to give Dredge praise for is that it is just exceptionally polished. The game runs so smoothly, and I don't just mean in terms of how it will run on your hardware, although it will probably run really well. Dredge's install size is less than 1 GB and somehow even less than Caves of Cud, and it's not going to need really powerful hardware. What I mean more is that there are just no hiccups in this game's design. Dredge must have had an ocean of playtesting that wore down every jagged edge and sunk any extraneous mechanics to the depths of Davy Jones' locker. All of Dredge's aspects, the fishing, the movement, the conversations, even the inventory management, all work fluidly whether you're playing with a mouse and keyboard or with a controller. It's hard to describe the exact feeling, but it's like when you knock on a solid bit of wooden furniture, and you can just tell that this is something that's well made. The comment about playtesting is also because of how frictionless all of the gameplay is. There are times when I'm playing video games and I see a mechanic or notice a design choice, and you can instantly feel what the issue must have been during playtesting that this has sort of been designed to correct. And in Dredge that happened all the time. The reaction-based fishing is simple, solid and rewarding, but it doesn't include a threat of losing your catch, presumably because that was deemed too frustrating. The boat steers more like a car than a boat because this isn't a simulator, it's an exploration/fishing game, and presumably it was deemed that realistic movement with an awkward, clumsy turning circle would be too frustrating. And on top of that, while the world is large enough to feel interesting, it's also small enough that travelling to new zones is fairly quick even without upgraded engines. Unlockable trawl nets and crab pots are introduced to let you passively catch some fish, or crabs, and earn some income, and I can just imagine playing the game without these tools, where you spend a couple of days dealing with a particular quest line, finish it, and then realise you can't upgrade or fix your boat because you haven't got any money because you haven't done any fishing. And that would probably be too frustrating. The whole game is filled with these player-friendly design decisions that just make it so easy to play. The polish also continues in the aesthetics of the game. Dredge is such a good looking title and doesn't need a dozen gigabytes of textures to do so. From the expanses of open water and low poly coastlines fading into fog, to the distinctive character portraits and the creative designs of the aberrant fish, so many parts of Dredge look excellent, and that's before considering the trippy, chromatic aberration filled visuals and events when you succumb to panic on the high seas. There's also a great soundtrack that sells the spooky and mellow nature of life in Dredge's world, the main theme in particular being really, really good. It all lends itself to an interesting world that feels full of the unknown and encourages you to explore it. And of course that's also encouraged by the more general satisfying aspect of fishing games. The great range of fish and their spooky or disturbed variants offer a lot of new things to find. And there's nothing cool or high concept about it, it's just that filling out an encyclopedia is a satisfying thing to do. And as is often the case with fishing games, Dredge is also strangely relaxing. You find a spot, you play out the short rhythmic action of reeling in a few fish, get the reward of a new thing in your inventory, and then just smoothly glide on and go again. It's tried and tested gameplay that just works. All of these things make Dredge a good game, a very good game, undeniably a very good game. But, and brace for what is not quite a full mid-review turnaround, despite all of that, I think it's a game that falls just short of great. Beyond the mechanics of a simple but solid fishing game is where Dredge felt a little disappointing. Although even that sounds too harsh, it's where it felt like there was missed potential. This isn't just a fishing game, this is a fishing game with horror and monsters. Each of the areas in the game has its own unique monstrous threat of some creature from the deep, and inevitably as you explore each zone you'll have a moment where you meet this threat for the first time and it's brilliant. It's a great moment, especially when it's shocking or unexpected, and it might hurt you. And when you explore further it might catch you off guard and hurt you again. And you will have one or two interesting interactions with each creature, before being able to completely ignore them for the rest of the game. And I think what the issue overall boils down to is that Dredge is a game that simply has no stakes. The game has this feeling of a looming darkness hanging over the whole region, and yet you just casually meander about and it doesn't really matter. In the game's tutorial, the town's mayor gives you a loan for a new boat that you spend the first 30 minutes or so paying back through fishing. But once that's over, in the tutorial, there isn't any sort of incentive to act quickly for the rest of the game. And without a need to act quickly, there isn't a need to take risks. Some of Dredge's more interesting hazards and visuals happen while you're in a state of panic. But if you're ever tired and need to carry out some new task, you just head to a dock and rest and do whatever it is the following day in a better state. And it's the same if your boat's taken damage. You stop, fix it up at a dock, and then get back to whatever you were doing afterwards. All it costs you in the game is a few hours of time, which has no downside. The lack of any overall time pressure means you will inevitably fall into a safe and simple approach to everything. If you need to go where a monster could harm you, you just navigate away from it or around it and complete your task marginally later. In the end, you just don't actually interact with these threats that feel like they should be a bigger part of the game. One of the creatures, and I'm not joking, you can disable by going and pushing a button. You just turn off the danger and then go fishing. The desire to explore a new area, find out what its new twists are and what the new creature will be, is genuinely good. I really did head into each new area with a lot of excitement and grand expectations. But following that period of excitement, each zone was a bit of a box-ticking exercise, carrying out each new fetch quest and returning to each relevant inhabitant with nothing really impeding you until the contribution to the main questline was resolved. If I wanted to be clever about it, I'd say that in some ways the smoothness of Dredge's gameplay is both its greatest strength and its most limiting factor. It's so good in how it's generally satisfying, but in specific moments it just lacked bite. There needs to be a jagged edge somewhere that makes you really have to do something difficult or clever, but in Dredge you can largely just go through the motions. And those motions are fine. The fishing is satisfying, the collecting and finding is neat, and building this bigger, faster boat is rewarding. But that little bit extra, that little bit that would take this from a very good fishing game to an exceptional adventure, just isn't quite there. Although, I would like to make an exception to what I've said, which is that the first few hours of the game are incredible. It's where the mystery is at its peak. You really have to be wary of the dark with your slow, unupgraded boat. Multiple characters are appearing and a story is starting to develop, and actually, the monster of the Marrows is just by far the best in the game. It's the only one that makes an area tense for an extended period of time. This was the area in the pre-release demo, and the reason that I wanted to play Dredge at all. It's a really strong initial peak before the game settles down into a much calmer and more consistent gameplay that it maintains for the following 4 sections. Or, if you have the DLC, the following 5. That was my quick segue into the Pale Reach DLC. The Pale Reach adds a new location that's similar in scale to one of the 4 zones of the base game, an icy region far to the south of the main map. Like the other zones, it has its own small self-contained story and quest lines, which are fetch quests to get specific fish or dredge specific items just as before. The Pale Reach has one of the better setups of intriguing story, focused on the sailors of a boat that reached this place a long time ago. Reached, but never left. It doesn't do anything to really affect the story of the base game, but it works as a standalone thing. The reason to get the Pale Reach is to play more of the same. More species of fish and aberrations to catch in a new zone with some new equipment and a new monster. It's not game changing, but it's as solid as everything before. But I do have one pretty important issue with it. The Pale Reach is mid-game content, another location to explore as you progress through the other 4. But as a DLC, I think it's something a lot of people, including myself, will play as an additional endgame zone having already beaten Dredge. If you've completed Dredge, then your excess funds and upgraded engines remove any challenge from this new zone. I could buy all the equipment instantly, and the main creature of the Pale Reach's icy wasteland literally could not catch up with my boat's base movement speed. What is probably a couple of hours of extra mid-game is only half that if you're playing this after completing the main story. I think it would have made a lot more sense to balance an area for after the main ending, so that new and old players alike would all get the same experience. Overall, I really do like Dredge, even though there are seemingly quite important aspects that I don't necessarily think it does all that well. Dredge is a game that's been superbly well received, with an overwhelmingly positive response if you look at its 20,000 plus Steam reviews, and I can fully see why. The cool world, great visuals and music, strong atmosphere and consistent mechanics create a game that's almost never unsatisfying. Despite being set on open water, you always feel like you're on solid ground while playing. There's no reason that I think anyone would dislike this game. Dredge just does very little wrong in what it offers. I just on occasion wanted it to offer more. It's the aspect of Dredge that are calm and relaxing where it excels, as opposed to the moments of Lovecraftian horror which are probably its unique selling point. Dredge has an odd similarity to strange horticulture in that it manages to be both cozy and lightly spooky all at the same time. I don't think you'll ever have the most incredible time playing Dredge, but you probably also won't ever have a bad time with it across its full 10-hour stretch, which is why I think it's a game worth recommending. It's just consistently good, which is impressive in itself, and it's a game that I think will have a lot of you out there hooked.